Welcome, everyone, to our pre-show lecture for CLYDE'S by Lynn Nottage. I'm Marcella Kearns, Artistic Associate at Forward, and I'll be your host today. I hope you're hungry. If you're not now, by the end of the performance, I bet you will be. First, a little bit about our playwright. I am an optimist. I am someone that, in order to get up in the morning, I have to imagine I'm going to be facing a day that was better than yesterday. This is Lynn Nottage. Two-time Pulitzer Prize winning playwright Nottage had 3 productions running simultaneously in New York last year. CLYDE'S, the musical MJ, which earned 10 Tony nominations, and an opera adaptation of her play Intimate Apparel. An established figure in the American theater since the 1990s, her career skyrocketed in the early 2000s. She holds the distinction of being the only woman to hold 2 Pulitzer Prizes for drama, standing with other multiple winners such as Eugene O'Neill, Edward Albee, Thornton Wilder, Tennessee Williams, and August Wilson. Nottage won her first Pulitzer in 2009 for her play Ruined, her second for Sweat in 2019. More about Sweat to come. Lynn Nottage was born and raised in New York City to parents who were active in work for civil rights and social justice. In fact, her mother started a weekend school to share African and African American history and culture. Always steeped in the arts, she wrote her first play in high school called The Dark Side of Verona. The play was about Black actors performing Shakespeare in the Deep South. Upon entering that play in a national competition, Nottage won one of 4 places for high school students to study musical theater writing in a workshop conducted by none other than Stephen Sondheim. So, though she showed early promise as a writer, she initially went to Brown University on a pre-med scholarship. She ended up switching majors, as you might guess, majoring in English and African American studies. She then attended Yale School of Drama to earn her MFA. But as a biographical essay for the Goodman detailed, she sold her word processor and gave up writing amid the AIDS epidemic and the 1990s drug crisis. Nottage worked as the national press officer for Amnesty International during this time, and this influence and work solidified a path towards which I think she had always been leaning, amplifying the human story. Returning to writing, she was eventually named a MacArthur Fellow, recipient of the Genius Grant. Nottage, in her process, is a really deep researcher. For Ruined, the inception of the play had been an adaptation in partnership with a frequent collaborator, Kate Wariski, of Bertolt Brecht's Mother Courage and Her Children. Its development and evolution involved 3 separate trips to East Africa to interview women of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Sweat was developed as a commission from the Oregon Shakespeare Festival to cover a uniquely American subject, choosing, as she did, the decline of industry. After Reading, Pennsylvania was identified by Survey in 2011 as the poorest small city in America, she traveled there to immerse herself in interviews and research with residents who had been affected by the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and the disruption of a legacy of industry in the region. Sweat premiered at OSF in 2015 and eventually had a Broadway transfer by 2017. But that's not all. Nottage was concerned that her work reached the people most directly involved with that play's subject. Working with the Public Theater, she arranged for the play to be performed free of charge in Reading and in 17 other depressed industrial communities in the Midwest. And this created opportunities for public discussion after each performance. Returning to the scene that inspired the play, she ended up, as achievement.org says, creating a multimedia installation called This is Reading to bring together, as it says, the sectors of the community long divided by race, class, and other perceived cultural differences. Nottage and her collaborators filled a derelict train station with giant projections, recorded interviews, and aerial photography to give the people of Reading a new perspective on their town and one another. I continue the quote, by overhauling an abandoned structure and bringing an audience to a neglected downtown neighborhood, the project stimulated interest in the area's economic revival. In an interview with playwright Paula Vogel, Nottage shared the reaction those performances experienced. She says, it was an overwhelming response. I think that the actors were so giddy when it finished and so stimulated by the questions and the responses that it reinvigorated this next stage of production because they knew that this play was supported by people in Reading and that it is truthful to the experience. On some level, they thought they had been performing a fiction. Now they understand that they're performing something other than fiction, which is different, and it was fun. And then afterwards, they all went to the bar that it was based on and stayed out much too late. In other words, in her own words, I'm not a human rights activist. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a journalist. But what I can do, that many of them won't do, is that I can listen to your story from beginning to end, and I'll do it with patience, and I'll do it with compassion. A little bit about Nottage's day-to-day. She serves as an associate professor at Columbia University School of the Arts, and she's a member of the Dramatists Guild. She lives in New York with her husband, filmmaker Tony Gerber, and they have 2 daughters. A little bit about the play. In September 2022, American Theater announced on its Off-Script podcast, this is TCG, Theater Communications Group, that Clyde's would be the most produced play of the 2022-2023 season. Nottage shared that distinction with Lauren Gunderson that season of being the top produced playwright in the United States, with 11 productions of Clyde's and 7 productions of her Pulitzer Prize winning play Sweat. That momentum hasn't slowed this season. So this season, the top produced play of the season around the country is Heidi Schreck's What the Constitution Means to Me, which of course Ford will produce at the end of our season. But taking a close second is, yes, Clyde's, with 14 productions across the country. Commissioned by Joe Dowling and produced by Joseph Hodge, artistic directors at the Guthrie, Clyde's received its world premiere there in 2019. Kate Worski directed. A Broadway production was planned, but we know what happened in 2020, and the play finally premiered on Broadway 17 months after it was originally scheduled in 2021. In 2022, it received a Tony nomination for Best Play. Ford's production actually is the Wisconsin premiere of the play. Fun fact, this is Ford's 4th play to take place in Pennsylvania after Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike, Fun Home, and Sons of the Prophet, in which our director for Clyde's, Jake Penner, appeared. About the story itself. Remember that research about Reading, PA for Sweat? So Clyde's takes place in a truck stop sandwich shop somewhere outside that very city, but also, no spoilers, is in a liminal space. Clyde's, which even includes a character who originally appeared in Sweat, does honor to the human story here as well, and to Nottage's optimism, I think. On the surface, Clyde's is a play about sandwiches. Clyde's the boss, and the ensemble of characters you'll meet cooks in the shop's kitchen. Anyone who has indulged in the hit show The Bear will immediately catch the flavor, no pun intended, and high-speed, high-stress work behind the scenes in a restaurant. Anyone who has worked in food service will feel the alternating rhythms of lull and demand. One thing that each character has in common is that they are all formerly incarcerated and looking to build their lives on the outside. Each character stands on the threshold of surviving, connecting, hoping to thrive. One director spoke of Sweat so, this is a play about people who don't get a play written about them. Which leads me to our director, Jake Penner. Jake is a former artistic associate of APT and a former advisory company member and associate director for Forward. He has worked on Forward's main stage as an actor, but his interest in directing led him to working closely with Jen Gray as mentor and colleague as he expanded his own skill set. He directed the Wisconsin premiere of Morisseau's Skeleton Crew for Forward back in 2018, along with Sam Hunter's Clarkston in 2021, and he returned to us for Clyde's immediately after his latest stint at APT, helming Anton's shorts this summer. We asked him to share a few thoughts with us for you. Jake is incredibly eloquent, so I am going to quote him specifically. So we asked him, first of all, what intrigued you most about this script when you first approached it? I know Jen was thinking of you. So he says, I was immediately drawn to the tension between Western and Eastern perspectives on rehabilitation. The West, incarceration in the play, or more specifically, Clyde, seems to want to suggest that the path to righteousness is rooted in punishment or poverty. And while that's a sound enough idea for us to base whole systems on, the American criminal justice system or Christianity, for example, Nottage seems to be implying an inherent deficit in this approach. Each of these characters, Montrellis, Letitia, Raphael, Jason, even Clyde herself, have undergone extended periods of incarceration, a practice at least partially intended to rehabilitate. And yet, there remains a still broken part of them that was in no way influenced by the prison experience. Once on the outside again, and working in the kitchen through consistent and conscious practice of making food for others, are they finally able to start addressing whatever deficiency ultimately landed them behind bars. In that way, the whole play is an almost tug of war between two competing philosophies on life and spirituality and society. It's fantastic writing. We also asked Jake, no spoilers, of course, but if you've any in rehearsal discoveries you'd like to share, what would you share? He did say, I can't speak for the other members of the team, but my own big discovery happened immediately after we'd wrapped up the first read through on day one of rehearsal. I was looking for a way to connect the drama that follows these five characters in the play to some relevant aspect of our own lives at this moment in time, or at least in my own life. Once the actors had finished reading, I got it, he said. This play is arguing along a very simple dichotomy: have hope or don't have hope. Each perspective is embodied by Montrellis and Clyde, respectively, and the other three, Jason, Letitia, Raphael, are caught in the middle trying to decide which outlook to adopt. So, have hope is a steep uphill climb for three formerly incarcerated people, unable to generate any real economic or familial momentum for themselves. But I think that's the point. Remaining hopeful is hard, but hope for a better future may be hardwired into us and has been the thing that's pulled us along the continuum of progress we've been following since our very early days. So we also talked with Jake a little bit about how this script demands deep technical attention in terms of consumables, the sandwiches and all those supplies and props. So in asking him how we strategized or planned for those really intricate rehearsals, we also wanted to know a little bit about how that process or that necessity for this particular production meshed with or challenged his own director's process. Jake's reply is that Nottage could just as easily have titled this play Clyde's Logistics. Thankfully, he said, I had a tremendous amount of help from our assistant stage manager, Abby. Shout out to Abby Hess, who charted, cataloged, recipeed, and managed all of our food props during the rehearsal process. It did not look easy or fun. Additionally, the cast themselves were instrumental in helping think through those moments in the script Nottage leaves for teams to take creative license to decide what food to make and how. On my end, he said it really challenged my usual rehearsal process. We basically took a break from acting and directing at the end of the second week of rehearsal to focus primarily on food and how that food would affect the specific timing and flow of the show we were in the process of building. Thankfully, the addition of the food-related elements didn't pull our show too far in unintended directions, but it definitely added an extra layer to the drama that we continued to play with, really up until opening night. So, for instance, if a character is chopping vegetables while her anguish and upset grows in intensity, that's going to have an obvious sonic effect that reflects her internal state. If, for example, a character is sharpening a knife, those downward swipes are going to need to be timed around other dialogue without affecting the scene playing out around them. But it should also reveal something about the character sharpening the blade. It ended up being part of the overall logic of human behavior we built into the show. We finally wanted to check in with Jake, who's a part of the Ford community, has been with us off and on for many years. We wanted to know what it's like to come back to Ford in this capacity. It's been a couple of years since he last directed here. And Jake replied, "Coming back to Ford has been like eating a home-cooked meal after a long road trip. Everything is familiar and everything works the way you remember, which really affords you the ability to just focus on building community in the rehearsal room and amongst the wider team and making something great. I don't live in Madison anymore," he said, "but I sure do miss it, and this process was a strong reminder of that." Thanks, Jake, for your words. I'd like to jump now to our artistic director's take. Why put Clyde's in the season? I talked with Jen, and she said, so we'd been keeping our eye on Clyde's since it was called Floyd's and was happening at the Guthrie. It was about food. It was about a big social issue, namely how we support or don't support the formerly incarcerated in our communities. She said, "We finally succeeded in getting a copy of the script after it had been renamed and during the pandemic was gearing up for a New York run." Ford had just been really curious about it because it seemed like, in her words, a slam dunk for the kind of work that Ford likes to do. After reading it, we put the application in almost immediately, not because every single aspect of the play is completely perfect, but because the sum of it is so much greater than its parts. The opportunity to talk about something deep and important in the framework of a comedy, in the framework of a visually and sensorially appealing show with a diverse cast, was incredible. The characters are so specific unto themselves, but also universally relatable. It was a no-brainer, she said, and we were fortunate to get a license a while back, so we knew very early on that it would be a tentpole for our 2022-2023 season. And we ended up building and looking at the combination of other plays in connection with Clyde's. Actually, it was really our anchor. Play about food leads me to food and design. I bet you're wondering about that food under the auspices of props master Pamela Miles. So Jake shared some of the inside scoop about our heroic assistant stage manager, Abby Hess, and the quest to figure out the food. One extra scrap or tidbit here. Again, no pun intended. Metcalf's has graciously served us up an in-kind donation of food, both for rehearsals and performances. Managing director Julie Swenson picks up bags and bags of food every week. The week before Tech, I think her count was 11 bags of food. As the recipes have worked out within the script and in our production, she shared, we're using just about everything that's mentioned in the script. So audience, prepare your senses. Everything except for the expensive cheese that is mentioned. And in that instance, we are using a white cheese, with the potential to have a lot of food waste in rehearsals as rehearsals and performances work through those consumable props. We do have a system set up to compost through green box compost. On to other designers. Our designers offered more insight into their process and building the world with Jake at the first rehearsal for the production. I'd like to share some of those thoughts with you now, how your senses will be indulged as you enter the theater. First, a little bit from Keith Pitts, our scenic designer. In his words, Keith's goal was to try to build and make the stage look as much like a real kitchen as he could without, quote, sending forward into bankruptcy, end quote. Keith was taken with reading the play, with the in-between space, characters in between and back into the world at large. So a lot of what he researched was actual prison kitchen spaces and then commercial kitchen spaces. What he learned was that there's really not much of a difference. He wanted to create a kitchen that felt like a middle ground, where both you could believe it as a commercial kitchen or as an extension of the prison itself. So, looking at ground plans at those images, prison cafeterias, eating spaces, he came up with a rough idea that he shared with Jake early on about a space that was divided into two parts. And now, this you'll see when you see the production. Upstage, he said, is hyper-realistic, as realistic a working space as you can get, with fire extinguishers, exposed conduits, etc. But downstage of the kitchen portal, there's a lot more open space. It's a clean, Zen space. So the nature of designing a thrust, he says, really lends itself to that space. And he liked this idea of a divided place, a liminal space, as the script actually says, that's in between just as characters are experiencing their lives. One of the things I wanted to do, he said, with colors was to give it a neutral look with a green tint, which makes me think more of those institutions, hospitals, prisons, that kind of greenish gray tint, to bring into our world, but keep neutral so that when Jason Fassel lights it, it can take on any light to heighten emotion as needed. Jason Orlenko was our costume designer. He is a frequent designer in our region and is also on faculty at UW-Milwaukee. He began his work considering that for the most part, the clothes are just normal clothes that people wear when they work in a kitchen. He did include some research from the Bear, given a large common cultural touch point: blue aprons. As he said, I'll steal from the best. A costume designer's process often includes what they call building closets for characters. So initially, in his design, Jason built a closet of research for all the characters that work in the kitchen. And then he turned to exploring a very extravagant closet for Clyde. He initially drew sketches since he knew he was going to shop for a lot of these clothes. One insider tip: you'll see that Clyde has a different outfit for every scene. Jason wanted her to begin that show very colorful and then shift more to a lack of color. Conversely, the kitchen workers you'll see start without color and then end up with much more color. Jason and Dana Pellebon, who plays Clyde, worked together to find a series of outfits in which she, as our title character, felt powerful. From Joe Cirqua, our resident sound designer and composer. Joe's original composition for Clyde's actually evolved from a memory. Like Keith's keying into the space as two worlds, Joe followed a similar line. Thinking about the music of this show, he said, decades ago, my band was actually hired to go and play a series of concerts in Illinois prisons. And what we found was that the style of music that the prisoners responded to was very upbeat, bluesy, funky stuff. So when I started thinking about music for this show, I immediately went there: blues, funk, a certain amount of jazz, and hip hop. I'm building in guitars, bass, piano, organ, all to get the mood. Jason Fassel, our lighting designer, says famously at many first rehearsals I've heard him attend, "There will be lights." Jason's process was actually deeply attached to Keith's, with the upstage world of the play so closely approximating a commercial kitchen. Keith drew in hanging fluorescent lights, an exit light. heat lamps, and other realistic features. So Jason worked very closely to detail those, but I think you'll also enjoy some surprises, thinking back to Keith's design and division of the space into really two worlds. A side note on design, too. Yes, it's real food, and yes, there are knives. Forward has a deep commitment to safety and invests resources in making sure that people working on our shows are safe. So we engaged someone to come in and give knife skills lessons to actors during rehearsal. You may find as you watch that there are other additional elements and effects to which we needed to pay close attention for sustainability and safety. That's part of the process that doesn't often get talked about, but is actually key. We want to be able to repeat a scene. We want everyone to be able to be fit to continue to do it again. So safety is always paramount. About those folks who are wielding the knives on stage, our artists, our actors, three happen to be making their forward debuts with Clyde's. We're very excited to share this. First, Dana Pelabon, as I mentioned earlier, appears as our title character, Clyde. Dana is by day executive director of RCC, Sexual Violence Resource Center, and a Dane County Board supervisor. But we're really thrilled to have her here as our onstage boss for this production. Sean Longenecker plays Jason, the newest arrival to Clyde's Kitchen. They most recently co-directed The Birds with Mercury Players Theater at the Bartell alongside Matt Reines, who is incidentally an understudy for us on this production as well. Sean is a mainstay on local stages. Ronald Roman Melendez comes to us most recently from this summer's APT season, where he played George in Our Town and appeared in addition in The Merry Wives of Windsor and Romeo and Juliet. Our forward veterans this production include DeMonte Henning and Nadja Simmons. DeMonte co-directed The Niceties with Jen Gray during the pandemic and a workshop reading of a new play last year by our writer-in-residence, Amy Kwan Berry. He also appeared in Learning to Stay and Skeleton Crew, the latter of which actually marks his second collaboration at Forward with Jake Penner. Nadja, a member of Forward's advisory company and literary committee, graces the cover of our brochures this year in the last role she played for us, the Nina, in last season's Airness. You also may have caught her in Mary Jane and 46 Plays for America's First Ladies. Incidentally, also debuting with us is our stage manager, Sarah Nicholson. So shout out to the captain of the ship while the show is running. A final message. To take home the goods, the baked goods, that is. So as I wrap up today and prepare to send you into the theater, I'd like to draw your attention to our community partner for this production, Just Dane, and their Just Bakery initiative. Just Dane, celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, is a nonprofit agency that offers, as they say, an array of direct service programs for individuals and families involved in the criminal justice system. I continue the quote. These services include prison reentry programs and services for children who have an incarcerated parent, community events designed to help people understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of someone newly released from prison, and jail and prison in-reach programs. Just Dane asserts that it's better for everyone in our community when we can ensure a person has the chance to put the pieces of their lives back together, creating a community where everyone has the opportunity to succeed. Just Bakery, an initiative of Just Dane, is an extensive educational and vocational training program. Just Bakery teaches hospitality, restaurant management, supervision, cost control, nutrition, and serve safe to their students. They also have intro to baking hands-on in their commercial kitchen. The curriculum allows their students to earn up to 12 college credits, gain automatic acceptance into the Madison College Culinary Program. They also receive sales and marketing experience working side by side with program staff in a variety of sales venues. So they learn customer service and front of house skills. This is all from Just Dane and Just Bakery's website. I encourage you to check out programs that they have in detail. We are very fortunate, so check this out in the lobby when you go, to have culinary artists from Just Bakery joining us before evening performances and sometimes after. You can take home some incredible baked goods. I'm not excited. Yes, I am. I'm very excited. And while you're at it, you can also take home some information about how you can order food for pickup or delivery. Um, for those of you who are attending matinees, I'm very sorry that we can't tempt you to take home a treat on those particular performances, but you can stop by the Just Bakery spot in the lobby to take home information, again, about how you can order food for pickup or delivery. And I think it's 6 days a week that you can do that. So check it out. With that, I'd like to send you into our own commercial kitchen. Grab a drink. When you get there, say hello to friends from Forward outside the Playhouse and enjoy Clyde's. We're so happy to have you here. Take gentle care. We'll see you soon.